I'm going to tell you something I've never said out loud to anyone. Not to my wife, not to my friends, not even to a priest. And the reason I never said it isn't because I didn't know it. It's because I knew it too well. My name is Walter. I'm 80 years old. And the child I was hardest on is the one who looks at me now like I'm a stranger he's been asked to take care of. His name is Daniel. He's 53 years old. He calls me every Sunday, not because something in him needs to, but because something in him was raised to. There's a difference between those two things, and when you're 80, you feel that difference every single time the phone rings. I want to tell you how that happened. Not to explain myself, because I'm past the age of needing to sound reasonable, but because I think if I say it slowly and honestly, some of you will recognize something in it. Maybe in yourself, maybe in someone who raised you, and maybe that recognition is worth something even now. Daniel was my second child and my first son. When he was born, something shifted in me that I didn't fully understand at the time. I had a daughter, Miriam, who was 3 years older, and I loved her the way most fathers love their daughters, openly, warmly, without condition or agenda. But when Daniel came, I felt something different move through me. Something that wasn't just love. It was expectation. And I didn't know yet that expectation, when it lives inside love, can slowly hollow it out. From the time he was small, I watched Daniel the way a man watches something he's afraid will go wrong. Not because he was a bad child. He wasn't. He was quiet and curious and kind in that easy way some children are kind without effort, without being taught. But I couldn't see those things clearly because I was always looking slightly past them toward what I thought he should become. I grew up with very little. My father worked in a textile mill for 30 years and died at 61 with nothing to show for it except tired hands and a small house that wasn't fully paid off. I swore, the way young men who grew up poor always swear, that my children would have more. Not just more money, more standing, more confidence, more of everything I felt I lacked when I was young and didn't yet know the words for what I was missing. So when Daniel came along, I poured all of that into him. Every ambition I had quietly folded away, every door I felt had been closed to me. I aimed at him like a kind of inheritance. The problem is that you cannot hand someone your unlived life without also handing them the weight of it. He was 7 years old the first time I remember making him feel small. We were at the kitchen table. He had brought home a drawing from school, something he had made in art class, a house with a tree beside it and a sky full of crooked yellow stars. His teacher had written "wonderful" at the bottom in red ink. He laid it on the table in front of me with that particular pride children have when they've made something and they want the person they love most to see it. I looked at it. I remember looking at it, and then I said, "That's nice, but you should be spending more time on your reading." He picked the drawing up slowly and carried it to his room, and I went back to my newspaper. And I want you to understand that in that moment, I felt nothing wrong. I thought I was being practical. I thought I was preparing him. I had no idea that I had just taught him something he would carry for the rest of his life, which is that the things he made from his heart were not as valuable as the things I thought he should be building toward. That was one moment, but a life is not made of one moment. A life is made of 10,000 moments just like that one, small and ordinary and invisible while they're happening, and enormous when you finally turn around and look at the shape of them together. Through his childhood and into his teenage years, I corrected him constantly. His grades were never quite high enough. His friends were never quite the right kind. His choices were always examined and often found lacking. Not in a cruel way. I was never a cruel man, but there is a particular kind of damage that comes not from cruelty, but from perpetual, well-meaning correction. It tells a child not that he is bad, but that he is not quite right. And a child who grows up feeling not quite right eventually stops bringing himself to the table at all. By the time Daniel was 16, something had changed between us that I couldn't fully name. He was still respectful, still showed up for dinner, still answered when I spoke to him. But there was a distance in his eyes that hadn't been there before, a kind of careful neutrality, the way a person looks when they've decided the safest thing is to feel as little as possible in a particular room. I noticed it. Of course I noticed it. But I told myself it was just adolescence. I told myself all boys pull away from their fathers at that age. I told myself I was imagining things, and I kept right on correcting him because stopping felt to me like giving up, and I had never been a man who gave up on anything. He went to university and studied architecture. Not medicine, not law, not business, the things I had quietly hoped for. Architecture. When he told me, I said, "What kind of work is that?" Not as a question, as a statement. He looked at me for a moment and then looked away, and something in that look I have thought about many times since. He became a good architect, a very good one actually. He's respected in his work. He has built things that will stand long after both of us are gone, and I say that now with genuine pride. But for the first 20 years of his career, I said it with a kind of reluctant acknowledgement, as if I were granting him permission to be proud of himself, as if my approval was still the measure of his worth. His mother, my wife Ruth, she saw what was happening long before I did. Ruth was a perceptive woman in the way that people who love quietly and watchfully are always perceptive. She would say to me, "Harold, you are going to lose that boy if you don't find another way." And I would say, "I'm not losing anyone, I'm preparing him for the world." And she would go quiet in that way she had, not because she agreed with me, but because she knew there was no point in continuing. Ruth passed 11 years ago, and one of the things I have lived with since is the knowledge that she was right about Daniel long before I was willing to hear it. After she died, Daniel came home for the funeral and stayed for a week. And during that week I saw him in a way I hadn't seen him in a long time, not as the child I had been trying to shape, but as a man. A full, complete, separate man with a life I had only the edges of, with grief that was his own, and memories of his mother that didn't include me. He cried in a way I hadn't seen since he was a small boy, and I wanted to put my hand on his shoulder and tell him something true. But I didn't know how. I had spent so many years teaching him to be stronger than his feelings that I had never learned to stand inside my own. That week ended. He went back to his life, and the Sunday phone calls began, steady and dutiful, arriving like clockwork, lasting exactly as long as they needed to, and leaving me with a feeling I can only describe as the echo of something that was never fully said. I've tried in these last years to say some of it. I told him once on one of those Sunday calls that I thought he had turned out well. He said, "Thank you, Dad," in a voice that was kind and careful, and we moved on to something else. I told him another time that I was proud of the work he'd done. He said he appreciated that, and I could hear in his voice that he did, but I could also hear that it arrived too late to land where it needed to land, which was not in the ears of the 53-year-old man on the phone, but in the heart of the 7-year-old boy who had carried a drawing home from school and been told to focus on his reading instead. You cannot go back and put your hand on the shoulder of the child you were hard on. That child is grown now and living in a man's body and has built an entire life around not needing you to finally show up. That is the thing I wish someone had told me when I was 35 and full of certainty about what a father was supposed to do. That the child will not wait forever. that there comes a point when the closing doesn't happen all at once, but so gradually you don't notice it until the door is already most of the way shut, and all you can do is stand on your side of it and wonder when you let it get that far. I'm not telling you this because I think Daniel and I are lost to each other. We're not. He is a good son in all the ways that are visible. But I know the difference now between a son who loves his father and a son who is at peace with him. And I know which one I have, and I know whose doing that is. If you are younger than I am and you are raising someone, I want to say one thing to you, and I want to say it plainly. The expectations you carry for your children are not the same thing as love, even when they feel like love from the inside. Love makes room. Expectation fills it up, and a child who grows up in a room that is already full of what you need him to be has nowhere to put what he actually is. I learned that too late to undo it, but I learned it clearly enough to say it, and maybe that is the only honest thing left that I can give.